More drama over there?
Okay. The board met in closed session and no action was taken, so we'll reconvene to open session at 4:46. I invite everyone to stand for the flag salute. Ready, begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve student disciplinary cases 86, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 101, 102, 104, 105, 106, 107, and 108 as recommended.
So moved.
Okay, we'll call for the vote then, please. Motion carries 3-0. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
The vote then, please. Motion carries 3-0. Next, we have reports and discussions. Campus security with Mrs. Johnson.
Can we switch that to be the last thing by any chance? They're all on their way.
Oh, okay.
I didn't believe we'd be on time.
I made the mistake. I told them 5:30, like the normal time.
Then we'll go ahead and move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and call for the vote then, please.
Hey,
Is
just
there
real
any
quick
questions?
on those portables, will they get going on them right away?
Yes,
And be ready for school year?
as soon as possible, they'll
Okay.
drop the contracts, and, it's gonna be touch and go whether
Yeah.
or not. But the principals have already been alerted to make plans for alternate measures.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions before we vote? Okay.
You're not open it? Oh, you already voted. Quick tonight.
Motion carries 3-0. We'll move to the action agenda. First item is approval of the local control accountability plan with Mrs. McCauley and Dr. Aguilar.
Yes, thank you, President Pickle. Again, a big thank you to all of our community members who participated, and in particular to Jeanette McCauley, who is first time around as the pen, if you would, and to Miss Kimberly Zamudio for coordinating all of the efforts. They did an outstanding job. With that, the superintendent recommends the Merced Union High School District Board of Trustees approve the local control accountability plan for the 2022-2023 school year.
So moved.
Questions for call for a vote?
Just that there were no changes made from last.
Vote then, please. And is approved 3-0. Moving on to proposed 2022-23 budget. Dr. Weimer.
So nothing has changed in the PowerPoints or the fax forms from the previous meeting, just to give you a little bit of an update on where we are. On Monday, the legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate, passed the Senate version of the budget bill. And so that starts a clock in Sacramento. The governor has 12 days until he either has to veto that bill or sign it into law. So they have 12 days to work out an agreement, or whether they're going to fight, and if they're going to fight, how ugly it gets. But I would assume that within that 12 days, they will actually figure out what it is they're going to compromise on, and then that would be stuff that goes into the budget between now and the end of June. Fiscal year does start on July 1st, so usually they have every intention of getting everything hammered out before they actually start the fiscal year on July 1st. So there are pieces in the May revise that are included in the budget that will most likely change, and so those will come back to us for first interim, if not in August or September, once we have the. Right now, pretty much all else we know is ADA will be at the 6.56% or higher, which is what was in the May revise, and then from there we wait to see what kind of compromise those two.
You mean COLA?
COLA, I'm sorry, what did I say?
ADA.
ADA, COLA. Sorry, COLA.
But what do you think is going to happen?
This is the first time the legislature has got this far ahead with the Assembly and the Senate on the same page. So I assume they're going to
Explain what that means as far ahead.
Usually what will happen is the Assembly has their version, the Senate will have their version of a bill, and then the two of them go into negotiations with the governor. This year, the Senate and the Assembly actually agreed on a bill 2 weeks ago. And so that is what they've actually now done, which is just passed their bill, and so they are on the same page, and the governor is on a different page. It's not just education, it's the entire budget. So what's going to be given up by one group so that they can get something from the other area or something like that, we don't know. I think the key piece for us that is not in the budget is the ADA relief for this current year. So the legislature did not include that in there. The legislature does have a fix for rolling averages for ADA going forward, but it doesn't do anything for the current year that we're in right now. They also have a interesting piece, which is funding of transportation, and then having mandatory transportation starting in the year 27. You always know they're concerned about whether they can actually do what they write into law when they put a date that far out for something to actually be implemented. The number of buses, number of bus drivers that would be required to implement what they're putting into that bill is just not feasible. They will figure that out over the 5 to 7 years before it actually kicks in. That it's just not practical. It's not. That's one of the pieces that's in there. The other one, which will throw a little bit of a wrinkle onto our sites, is that they have changed the definition of an unduplicated student in terms of low income. And so we would no longer use the free and reduced lunch process, which is what everybody in California has used forever. It would go to a new form, which is 250% of the federal poverty rate, which means we would have to create a new form, and all of our students, not just incoming freshmen, would have to fill it out again. And then we would be able to use that which would probably increase the number of students that we would have counting for lunch, because everybody gets free lunch, but would count towards our unduplicated count. It will cause some issues that they don't even know about, which is free and reduced lunch form is how you qualify for Title I funds. And so without having the same form, how then are we going to qualify for Title I funds? So there's a whole lot of details and stuff that they have to really get worked out in that 12 days.
COLA expectations?
The way in which the bill is written right now with the legislatures, they don't differentiate between COLA and other LCFF increases. The increase in their budget for ongoing increase is 16%. When asked about the fact that what happens in the downturn, are you going to just turn around and take that money after you just told everybody that it was ongoing? Their response was, we've had enough money in the last 2 years to put into the stabilization account. that we would be able to handle a downturn for a couple of years, still be able to fund that much of an increase. Using
That's
savings,
not an appropriate answer.
which is an answer that makes all of us scratch our heads. And it's interesting that it's on the same week that we basically find out we had our first quarter of negative growth in the country. 2 quarters of negative growth means we're in a recession. We had the S&P 500 hit a 20% drop from its highs, which means we are officially in a bear market as far as stock market, which is huge for income in California and how we make our tax dollars. And then today you had a 0.75% interest rate increase, which is the largest single interest rate increase in 28 years. All of which says we need to be careful in the next couple of years on how much tax revenues we're getting, and to get a 16% ongoing revenue is questionable whether that's something they can actually sustain. Questions on any of that?
Thanks for the doom and gloom.
That just means the money we're getting, we have to be very careful with it, make sure we're making good decisions with it.
Cautious is a good word.
With that, the superintendent recommends the board adopt the 22-23 budget and positive certification.
So moved.
Second. Vote then, please. Motion carries 3-0. Next, we have Education Protection Account and Public Hearing with Dr. Weimer.
One of the requirements when Proposition 30 was passed by the voters on November 6, 2012, was adding Article 13, Section 36 of the Constitution, creating in the general fund an education protection account. Another requirement for the EPA is to have a resolution adopted after a public hearing. And so we do have the resolution attached. What it does is it says we have a specific percentage amount every year that we have to make sure is spent on instruction. The amount for us this year is $31,557,758. We use all of that for salaries for teachers, so it's obviously instructional. Not even close to covering all of our teaching salaries. It's just we use all of it in teaching salaries to make this very easy process. So we do need a resolution that says we will meet our requirements under the EPA. We do need a public hearing.
At this time, the public is invited to address this item, so we'll open the public hearing at 4:59. Any comments? We will close the public hearing at 4:59.
And with that, the superintendent recommends the Board of Trustees adopt Resolution 19-21 for the Education Protection Account.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any additional questions? Vote then, please. Motion carries 3-0. Okay, we'll move back to our reports and discussions then. Campus security, Mrs. Johnson.
So at the last board meeting, Mr. Valadez had asked for us to do a presentation on some of the safety measures that we have in place. So tonight I'm here to give an overview of a few of the protocols that we have in place at each of our schools. All schools are required to submit safety plans annually. These plans include strategies aimed at the prevention of and education about potential incidents involving crime and violence on school campuses, as well as aspects of the social, emotional, and physical safety of both students and staff. The law requires stakeholders to annually engage in a systematic planning process to develop these strategies and policies, and then they're submitted to you, the board, for approval. We also conduct safety drills, which include fire drills, lockdown, and earthquake drills. In addition, the district, we have a team, a safety team, and we conduct surprise lockdown drills at each site. And during that time, we give an evaluation to the school of how they responded to the surprise lockdown. Prior to the pandemic, we offered active shooter training to our staff, and that is set to resume again for the upcoming school year. We're also going to be providing gang education training to staff for the upcoming school year. During all school breaks, before school, lunch, and after school, we have all liaisons and all admin out to provide supervision. And finally, we have a school resource officer that is assigned to all school sites, and for next year, we also have secured one for the Livingston school site, which we didn't have this school year. Since I do not work on a school site, I thought it would be more beneficial to hear about some of the practices on school sites and people who actually work at those sites. So tonight, I've invited Mrs. Euchre from Buhap Colony, Mrs. Gossman from Golden Valley, and Mr. Knott from Merced High to share some of the things that they work on at their schools.
Thank you, Christy, for inviting me. I love coming out and sharing things about. Anyway, so hello, board and cabinet. I'm going to talk about school safety at Buhap Colony and the communication and the community that we've created with our SRO in order to ensure that our campus is safe. So the reason that our branding is up there is this is the one thing that our entire staff agrees on is our branding. We made it as a team and as a group. It took, months, and this is our fourth year with it, and we can speak it now. And it's on the top is the most important. We are community ready. Well, how are we supposed to be community ready when I'm a 5 foot nothing, blonde hair, blue eyed grandmother of 4, and I live in McSwain, and my students come from the Beechwood area, and they come from Kelso and Swap and Determined, and we have very little in common. But what we do have in common is we can speak the same language of our branding, and we can only do that because of our SRO. So if you could click to the liaison and SRO map. So we are very fortunate on our campus with our SRO, and he he's vigilant in the community. He's a member of our family. He coaches one of our sports. And he is a great communicator. And here's why. I'm going to walk over here if you don't mind. So this map here is where all of our classrooms are, and in the green is where our liaisons stand. And this is just part of the map. And they stand there because of the communication that our SRO sends us. So, for example, we have Rayshawn and Charlene, and they are over in front of the H Academy. And the reason that they're there is because the night before, there was an incident in the Beechwood area, and what happened was some of our students, who are primarily blue, went over to the Beechwood area, and they made a big stink. So our SRO communicates with us, lets us know that, and says, hey, we need to add this person and this person to this area, because they know the students, they can identify shot callers, and they know when there's movement. So that's what we do. We rearrange our coverage almost at least weekly by being community ready and by our SRO identifying the communities that he works in and how it affects our campus. Another thing that he does for us is he helps us to identify what we can do and what we can say and how we can communicate with our different students on our campus so that we understand their life a little bit more. Because I think most of us in this room, we probably come from similar backgrounds, we have similar interests, and we vacation in probably some of the same places. Well, sometimes the students that we serve, they don't have the same backgrounds that we do, so how are we going to communicate with them? Well, he will let us know when something happens in a particular area, and he'll actually share names with us so that when we are back on campus the next day, I can go up to one of my students and say, hey, I heard that this happened in your neighborhood. Is there anything that your family needs? Is there anything that I can do for you? And if you can be community ready and communicate with your students through your SRO and being vigilant, then you can be better on your campus. So can you go ahead and go to the next one? The next, you can click off that. go to the evacuation map. So the second layer, that our SRO does for us is, this is our evacuation map. We label it our evacuation route, but this is our second layer of defense. So what he lets us know is, and I'll give you an example. We recently had a very, very well-known, not well-known to us, but a very well-known gang member released from prison, and he went back into the community on determined Kelso and swap. Now, how would I know that, right? I know that because it was communicated to us. Well, what we didn't know was how he was affected by what was going on our campus. So what he didn't like was that particular areas on our campus were designated blue and were designated red, and that we knew who everyone was. So we were alerted that he was going to make changes. And so when that happened, and it has happened several times last year and this year, is our SRO put in another layer of defense. So if you look at the evacuation route here, what we did was, and you can attest to this, we have a lot of admin designees, and we have extra support that we pull out of the classroom to cover. So then what we do when we need an extra layer, and we call it our evacuation route coverage, is in all these areas, we add more bodies. And we also add more SROs to our campus so that we are more diligent and we can attest to movement from the outside coming in. So, when we talk about school safety, I think the main thing is that you all have a purpose. And our purpose is our branding. Our purpose is that we make these students community ready, and that you know your community, and that you are able to communicate with your SRO on the weekends, at 5 in the morning, at a baseball game. And you're able to do that so that you can add more coverage on your campus. And that's what we have been able to do on our campus. We had an incident. It was a big one this year, and it garnered a lot of attention. And we added extra security for that. But on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis, this is what we do at UHAC Colony, and it's because of our SRO being out in the community and letting us know where our students come from, who they are, what they've done, where they've been, so that we can make the campus safer for everyone.
So Jim, when your alert status goes up, what you're saying is you'll pull out designees or other volunteers to help monitor those different areas of the campus, in between class, lunch.
Yep, before school, after school, in our bus area, yes, we will add more coverage. And we don't do our coverage is not coverage that, we don't stand by or stand back and watch, because we know them. We know they're our students. We care for them. We want them to be successful. We're right in the middle of them, calling them by their first name, talking about, hey, I heard this happened, and it's scary in your neighborhood right now. You're safe here. What can we do for you? Yeah, we still have fights and we still have things, but I've stood in the middle of groups that were going to fight and put my arms out and said, hey, I care for you. Your life is rough right now. Let us help you, or let UHAC be safe. And, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that if I didn't have the information from the SRO. So he's very, very community aware, and he really wants students to be safe. And from what, I've seen, and we had some visiting today to teach the classified, their message to me was the same, that, they really want the school to be a safe haven, and more way to do it. But yes, we pull them out in the street, we pull them so that they can watch all the entrances of, cars coming in. Because when you're on campus, you don't know what's happening what's happening outside. So that's what we added this year, and we use our evacuation route to where we put more bodies. I know it costs more money, and I know it's more overtime, and I know it's more this, and I know it's more that, but I just feel it's an extra.
Who did you say the bodies are? Like the extra bodies?
Oh, so admin designees are individuals on campus who are interested in becoming an administrator, and they fill out a form at the beginning of the year, and they are asked to come out at lunch or come out at break or come out during their prep and help administration in duties. So it could be that one period our student support office isn't covered because we're all in a meeting, so they might do that. It might be that there's no one to stand in the front of the school because we are, again, in a meeting, or we are, at a training, or we're busy. So we have, and I think we have 11 at VUHAC. And then we call our paras as well, who have, free lunch, or that's their lunchtime, and we just call and say, and we just send out, it's a remind and say, we've heard this might be on our campus today, our red, and they're always in the same place. It's not like a movie, where you look at them and hey, that's them. You wouldn't know I wouldn't know unless our SRO pointed it out, and when they're on the move, now we pay attention. And that's why, sometimes we've had them stay home for a day, or we've done things like that. We're trying to be proactive.
How long have you had the SRO that's on your campus now?
So this one we've had for 2 years. But previously, he was there, I think, for 4 years. One prior to you, I think he was there. Jesse did the same one for 4 years. So ours just didn't fit.
And will we have a new person, because we're going through the sheriff's department starting in the fall? Is that right?
I think too, we'll have the opportunity to speak to our branding and speak to these different layers that we had in place. Difficult when you have 4 different cities that your school pulls from, because it's not just the Atwater PD, it's Atwater PD, it's Merced PD, and then it is the sheriff who all service our students at VUHAC. So, but we've been really lucky because the one we have is so community driven. He coaches soccer, he coaches baseball, he coaches wrestling, and he's just everywhere in the community, not just Atwater, but also Merced and McWayne. So he's kind of, he's taught us a lot about what's out there, because, like when we drive down the street, we don't know, but he's, so now I know.
Thank you. The proactive and caring approach too, like the proactive, keeping the whole campus safe, but then also making sure the kids impacted know that you care and trying. Do you ever send them in for counseling, or is that not a method that you find works? Or you're talking about disruptions have occurred.
Yeah. So it's interesting because depending on who's in your office, there is a belief that counseling is for weaklings, for people who are weak. And so the answer is from the students usually. And so it is offered, but it is very rarely taken. Our prevention coordinator, Ms. Schaefer, is about, their closest thing to it. So they don't take us up on the offer. Have them for 6 hours and their parents have. When you meet their parents, you're like, okay, I get it. But let's just make this safe, let's get it.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
So,
fine.
you have a relationship with that officer, your staff does, that you've had for a couple of years. Is that going to be a significant disruption? Does that change next year?
I think the systems are in place with the staff, so I believe that, an officer, it's kind of like a teacher, kind of like an administrator. We all have the same purpose and the same goal. So I think that seeing the systems that are in place, that, we can all train each other. you know, he's still our wrestling coach, so he's still there, and, we all still have his number, so it's not like he's gonna be far away. We're still gonna be tethered. I have a feeling, he's very connected to a lot of the students on campus, because, you know, he coaches them. And then he's out in the community, so I don't believe that it'll be severed, and I just think, you know, another layer.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Early time. Then I asked Mrs. Goffman to come. We're looking at a scanning software. It scans IDs and gives information about students, but Golden Valley has been using it. It's called the SECA program, so I asked Mrs. Goffman to talk about that program. And board members. SECA is a program Golden Valley used. I think they started the year prior to me coming on, so they've used it for 4 years. It's an app on our phone that also communicates with the admin piece on the regular computer, and then whoever you want to have access on the app, you can make an account for. So it's basically a program that helps us scan kids into different events. We use them to scan them out at lunchtime. So the list on the side are all of our current buttons. It has some positive stuff on there. Then there's lots of things that are just negative. Dress code violations we use if we're out in the hallways. We don't always get a student that wants to go where they're supposed to go change. So if we dress code someone, we will pull that up and scan it in. That way a report goes to our student support secretary, and she can follow up on if they went to where they were supposed to go, did they really change? That way we can document it in that way. The Cougar Pride button looks like it's cut off at the top. We can give positive recognition for that. So if we see a kid doing something positive, we scan it in. Your buttons are linked to a roster in SECA that you can, they're either all green or they're mixed. So if they're all green, it means that any kid can be scanned in. They have access to anything. If they're going off campus for lunch, we have criteria that they have to meet. If they've ever been suspended, if they're below 90%, if they have bad grades, anything like that, they're not allowed to go off campus. So then they turn red. So if they ever get scanned on your phone, we scan it. We have a scanner computer at the front gate. We scan them out. If they pop up red, they're not allowed to leave. We look at it as they, in a lot of ways, can be a safety concern. If they've ever been suspended, they could go off campus and create problems, so we don't allow them to leave. We use buttons for dances. If we have kids that buy tickets, same thing. If they happen to be suspended or if they are not supposed to be there for whatever reason, we don't allow kids to transfer tickets. So if they didn't purchase the ticket and they show up, we have a roster that we can scan in. We did it at Sadie's this year, and we shared Sadie's between Merced and LCAP. And the Golden Valley kids are just walking in super fast because all we had to do is scan their ID and they just went straight in, versus everyone else was highlighting lists and trying to find kids. And this is the easy way to keep track of that. It does communicate with areas in a lot of pieces. We have this big LLC. You do not have to click on that link. It's a huge spreadsheet. There are pieces on it that do have to be managed by a human every day, or as often as they need to be. We run certain reports out of areas every day, so we can update all of those things that I just talked about. It runs at 10 o'clock. We update the spreadsheet in the morning. It then communicates with the spreadsheet about 10 o'clock for that day's lunch. Lunch is the biggest thing. We use it for tardy sweeps. That way we don't have to set up a station or anything like that. The kids don't know when we're doing those kinds of things because we all have the app on our phone. We could do a tardy sweep. We scan them all, their IDs, and we send them back to class. That report then goes every day at the end of the day to our student body or our student support secretary. She can look at all the data and see what needs to happen. We had a big issue with our restrooms. You notice the restroom button on there. We had a lot of graffiti and a lot of vandalism happening, so we started keeping track of how frequently kids were going in, which takes manpower. We had to have liaisons scan kids, but that way we can see that why did you need to go to the bathroom 15 times in one day? You know, you're probably not, you don't need to do that. So that way we can have conversations with kids on abusing restroom privileges, looking to see who's truant, because a lot of times if they're in the bathroom that often, they're not in class. It's a way for us to monitor. Another one that we use a lot is no ID card. So at Golden Valley, if you've ever been there in the morning, we have 3 entry points, one at the gym, one at the front gate, and one at the theater. There is always a liaison at those entry points with an administrator. So our liaisons have iPads that have the Seeka app on it. They scan kids in. If they don't have an ID card, again, we want them to have one. We require kids to show those to come on campus, and if they don't have one, we put it in. Say they didn't have an ID card, they get called in. They have an opportunity to go get an ID card, or they explain that I have it, it's just at home, I forgot it. And then if they don't have one, we send them over to get one. If they do it again, then there's consequences. So we want kids to show their ID when they come in so that we know they are supposed to be on campus. I've never been at a school that does that, and I've been at a lot of sites, and it's really nice to know. We know who kids are. We check them as they come in. We can always radio for a liaison, hey, has anyone seen this student? We know which gate they came through. We know which direction they went, and then we can track things that we need to track from Seeka. 90% is a big one that we use it for. It's part of that LOP. So LOP is loss of privilege, and there's this huge spreadsheet that goes with that. The guy out of Madera created. It calculates 90% attendance. We use it for every grade. I know board policy is seniors, but we use it for all. We help motivate them with eligibility for things. And then obviously our seniors, it helps us see who needs to go to Saturday Academy and get their attendance up. That is something that we run that report every day, and based on some user codes and areas, it communicates with this report to tell us exactly, based on the number of periods they have, what their accurate 90% or their accurate attendance percentage. We use it for that. A lot of the buttons, or all of the buttons, you can set them to communicate with parents. So automatically, if you scan them in for something, it'll let the parents know. So that's something that can be set for me as a parent. If I drop my kid off at a dance and it's not supposed to get over till 11 o'clock, but they left at 9:25, I'd want to know that. So you can set it to let the parents know that, hey, your kid came to the dance, but they left. So that way it communicates and kind of keeps all people that are trying to keep their kids safe. There's also a piece that we can add to it to scan in visitors using a driver's license.
And it prints out the pass, right?
Yes.
On the thing I saw a map, it doesn't have GPS tracking, right?
No.
Okay.
We don't track our kids.
So you said you have scanners at every entry point, just one?
Well, there's usually a liaison and an
And they're
administrator.
both scanning?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the liaison has one on their iPad that we provide, and then the administrators all have them on their phones.
So
I've been there,
what's
I've seen it, it's very efficient.
So what's the time?
Quick,
It's just,
they just are already in it.
and boom,
I mean,
boom, boom.
we've had, at lunch, especially at the beginning of the year, the first 5 weeks, we do an incentive that all kids can go off campus. We can get hundreds of kids out in 5 minutes. Because they just walk through and scan, and their ID pops up, okay, go. And then they also scan back in. So that way we can see who didn't return. We can see if they come back late. Once the incentive's over the first 5 weeks, if they come back late from lunch off campus, then they lose their off-campus privilege. So it helps us keep track, and we scan them in late from off-campus lunch, then they lose that privilege until the next semester. So just helps us really know where our kids are, and where they're not supposed to be. If they left for off-campus lunch and never returned, then we know they're truant. It helps kind of keep track of a lot of things without questioning, well, I think I saw Johnny leave, but I'm not really sure.
So this
I
would,
love that.
Yeah.
this would replace all the regular student IDs, correct?
So they still have to have an ID because you scan their ID card with this system.
I know, but they would replace the regular school ID.
No.
You just scan
So they
the
have two of them?
No, it's their regular school ID.
Yeah.
So it would be the
We
regular.
use their regular school ID, so there's a barcode reader
Got
that
it.
communicates with their number and areas, and then it has all the information.
So it would be this way, okay. And then right now you said, how many sites are using it?
I think we're the only ones that use it.
And this is your first year?
No, this is our fourth year.
Because
Yeah.
it looks like, if we do one school, it's $650, but if you, the district-wide is
District-wide is $100,000, yeah.
which is $450 per student is what I saw. So, assuming that's a one-time thing?
It's for 1 year. It's
1 year,
annual.
no,
That's
that's
annual.
Oh, but it's $450 per student, or is it just
I
a flat?
can't get the math in my head. I know the
100,000.
quote was between 100 and 105,000 for the entire district.
So we have 12,000 times 4.5. Where's the math teachers at?
Right here.
We got phones, we got calculators, okay.
So what have you seen as the benefits to this? I mean, obviously, you better tracking, You can, run different reports. What have you seen as the biggest benefits? And is one of them?
Accountability. I mean, for the kids, they have to be held accountable they have to have their ID cards. Actually, they don't. There is a feature where you can key it in yourself. If they don't have their ID card, you can do ID lookup. We don't ever use that for off campus. If they don't have their ID card, they can't go because it really slows it down. But on tardy sleeps, they're not all going to have their ID cards out when they're in the hallways. So you can key in their ID numbers. For us, it's just the 90% is a huge piece, and knowing who's supposed to be where is the other biggest safety feature.
Sometimes if you're at a football game, you have a student that's been expelled or suspended, you don't remember that off the top of your head. So if you're scanning, that will give you the information right away.
But decrease in truancies, decrease in...
We haven't done a lot with tracking that. On the 90%, yes, because we follow it, and we can keep track of it. It's down to if their periods change throughout the year, it calculates it based on the used to have a 6, now they have a 5 or 4, whatever it is. They went from 7 to 6, it calculates all of that. That piece has helped a lot, because we know who we need to talk to.
What about bathroom vandalism? Have you guys seen a decrease?
It helps with the bathroom vandalism, definitely. They don't like when somebody's out there monitoring whether they're going in, but it's the only way that we can see. That way we know who was in there. And we can also, if there is vandalism during a certain time, we also have liaisons check the restrooms every 15 minutes. That way we chunk it down to when the vandalism happened.
Yeah.
We then can run the report and see who was scanned in, and then we can look at the cameras to see who went in, and we can figure out exactly what happened. At least who we know to call in to search and find markers in their backpack.
So
It helps in that way too.
in order to do that, is there someone physically standing by the restrooms to scan them in and out?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm imagining you also have fewer issues with students not having their ID cards when they arrive daily. And then without a doubt, who's on your campus. If someone doesn't have an ID card.
If they don't have an ID card and they can't produce the number, they don't go in.
Can you scan it from a picture of their ID card on their phone?
Yes. If anything that's a barcode scanner, you could scan it. And the other thing
I mean,
is,
if the student has their ID
Yes.
card photo on their
Yes.
phone.
If they don't, they can give you their ID number and you can key it in. If 2 people scan the same ID, so what if someone came in and I scanned myself in already, and then Christy stole my number, so she comes in, it'll pop us up and let us know that number's already been used. So if you scan the second time, it'll pop up red. So that way you know that, hey, that ID card already came in, what's happening here? I would say Golden Valley, does a really good job knowing who's on campus.
That ID that then becomes part of campus culture.
Right.
Yeah.
They have them, they know.
Which is not a part of district culture. Look around in this room. We all have IDs. So this will be a big shift for most of the district. Okay, 1.
Came from Golden Valley.
You gotta model the behavior that you want, for the kids.
I've never seen
I
him wear
have it in
that
the
before.
car.
I think he just snapped it on right when
Yeah.
he said that.
Well, do they wear them around their necks or no?
Some do, they have them accessible, and we make them take them out of wherever they are in their backpack.
So my son put it behind his case on the phone.
Yeah, a lot of them have it on their phone, a lot of them keep them on the side of their backpack so that when they come up, a lot of them hang them on their backpack. They know coming into any gate that they have.
Is this something that, like, you go to, self-purchase at the stores now? That we can have something like that to scan it instead of having somebody standing at each door and all that, that actually, like a key card.
But then if there's an issue, you need to have a person there to address the issue. So if they scan themselves in without a person there, they could still get in, and you wouldn't know. Yeah, you have to have a person to man it.
Just like at the store, you still have to wait for them to come over.
And it's fast.
It's very fast.
At one
You don't get held
time,
up.
yeah, we started, we have, had quite a few incidents on campus that were concerned, so we wanted liaisons to be on campus. So we have our parent resource, person that she actually helps at the front gate during lunchtime, because she takes her lunch at a different time. So she helps scan out, that way we have additional manpower that's not a liaison standing at the front gate scanning. So she does that, and then coming back in, there's a scanner like you're talking about, not a person manning it, that they have to scan back in. If they come late, they have to use that scanner, because it can be on any laptop with a scanner attached to it. We use it for detention, I mean, we use it for lots of things, but our kids are used to it, they know the scanners,
Sure.
they know, it's just part of our culture.
So you are the campus that has had the most restroom issues. How does that tie into that? I mean, you don't have somebody at the boys' restroom every single period, and
We have a majority, yeah. And there's pockets, if they get pulled away, you'll see that then there's no data during that time period. So we
Okay.
don't have the manpower to have someone stand there their entire shift. They get pulled away on calls, then there's a hole for a little bit. And the kids probably know
you
that.
cover it the best you
We
can.
cover it the best we can, yes. It's not somebody standing there all day long for their whole shift. If they answer calls to go get someone from a classroom or anything else, in supervising, then there's a hole for a little while.
Okay.
We don't supervise between classes, and it breaks just because of the volume of kids going in, so it's more during class time. The kids using it between class and it breaks, they get in and they get out. It's the ones that are ditching class to go in, the class troubles that are the ones we're more.
Do you monitor the number of students that go in the restroom?
We
At a time?
don't anymore. We did during COVID, but that's not something that we kept. We could. Is that something we could add?
I assume you recommend this.
I love it, yeah.
What-
We've taken Clara went with us. Someday, we'll click on that LLC and show there's a lot of information on there that can't be shared, so we won't click on it right now, but, there's, the guy that made this spreadsheet he used to work for a school in Madera. And there's lots of queries and lots of things that read from Aries and things like that. There's buttons that fetch from Sika itself. So you go through and you read that and go, it's a lot. I don't understand all of it. I understand how to make it work, and if there's errors, there's things that you have to update each quarter. We took Clara with us to help her, maybe she could figure out, so that we didn't have this other guy that's kind of a middleman, that he's contracts through Sika contracts with him. But even Clara was kind of mind blown, and she's using it. I
imagine that eventually
Yeah.
Aries will be able to do this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but in the meantime, this is.
This is the guy that was from Fresno State, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Tiffany.
And then I asked Mr. Knott, they got the additional fencing at Merced High, trying to streamline where people come into campus, so I asked him to come talk about that.
Yeah, so, a few years ago, I think it was about 5 years ago, we had some new gating, added at Merced High School that, made what we affectionately call the dog park at the front of the school, because it reminds us of the dog park over on our street. But that area basically is where everyone enters our campus. So we made a concerted effort to really try to maintain a single point of entry, which is very difficult, at Merced High School. You guys are familiar with the campus. It's always been such an open campus, but we've got a lot of fencing added over the last few years, to make it a little bit more manageable. So that front entry point right at the front of the school is the one I'm talking about today. And then we do have the staff lot entry point that we also have to try to control. So, what it effectively is up on the left side of the screen here for non-students during school hours, we have, this year, we made it a priority to have someone there all the time. That wasn't always the case in the past. You would actually enter into the office and, either our school secretary or our campus administrative assistant would be the first person to contact them. Now, people are actually stopped before they enter campus or any building on campus to actually sign in, identify themselves, why they're at the school, and that way we hopefully can have a little bit safer environment. With that also, we've asked our liaisons to communicate ahead. So, for instance, as an example, our special education office is actually kind of across campus, but we have people coming onto campus for meetings. We asked them to radio out, and, we have a parent, we don't say names obviously for that, but we have a parent coming out. That way, they're kind of passing from liaison to liaison off campus to kind of look out for them as they're walking through campus, not only to help them if they need help, but also just to know who's walking around on campus and why they're there. We also asked them to radio ahead to our offices. As we know, sometimes parent visits aren't always a positive thing. Sometimes you get people that are a little upset or heated when they come to campus. It's always good to know that as well. So, 107, we have a parent coming for a meeting for so-and-so, or counseling office, we have a parent coming in for a meeting for so-and-so. So again, having people be ready to receive folks when they come into our building is always helpful. And on the flip side of that, we do ask them to sign out too when they leave. So, that's been one process. It's funny, Tiffany was talking about the secret program. We were actually discussing that today. I think, Christy, you said that they're looking at ways to scan digital driver's license, because we were talking about next steps for us. How do we improve on that? And that's really one of the things, is actually having people prove that they are who they say they are when they come and sign in. We did have a few instances this year where we think some people put some false information on there, so we need to make sure we get that tightened up. But that's what happens at the front gate. For students during school hours, same gate, same rules. They don't show their IDs right now to come on a campus, but we do greet them as they come through that single point of entry in the main parking lot. During lunch, they do scan in, scan out, though. We use a different program for that. It's not secret. We use 5-Star for that, as a way to track them. We've been using that for years and years. It talks to areas just like everything else does, as long as we're maintaining it and uploading what we need to upload into the system. So we sign them in and we sign them out. Same rules apply. If we scan them and they pop up red because for whatever reason they've lost the privilege to go off campus, then we stop them and we hold them. Our incentives for that are usually pretty simple. It's usually a grade eligibility and attendance eligibility for our upperclassmen who are allowed to go off campus, because for us it's just 11. So we use that during lunchtime, and it does, as was discussed earlier, requires them to have their IDs, and we actually have them show their physical ID. They generally don't wear them, but they have them. I think you mentioned they put them in the back of their phone cases. That's usually the most common thing that we see, but we do have kids who have them on their keys, or they'll have a lanyard in their pocket or something to pull out just to scan to leave. But that's been effective for us as well. And then also our students that finish class early and leave early, so let's say they have only 5 periods, they also leave through that single point of entry. Our liaisons that man the gates know our kids very well. So most, by halfway through the year, they know who the kids are that are leaving that aren't, but they are also students that leave early given a sticker that is basically for that purpose only. So the only kids on campus that have the stickers are the ones that are leaving early. They usually put those on their IDs as well, so they can flash them. So it's quick. We don't have to, really have a whole lot of interaction with them just to have a good day. See you later. So the kids do use that point of entry as well. Earlier, I was talking about the staff lot. That's where our biggest challenge is. So we did place someone there in the morning when we get most of our traffic. That's where most of the problem is in the morning. So we placed a liaison who stands there. He usually goes out there at about 7:15. The problem with that area is that, everybody knows the code. Once the code goes out there, it goes out there. So we have to have someone stand there and monitor who's coming in and who's going out. We do allow parents to drop in there usually until about 7:30, we start trying to hold the traffic. We're not going to ask them to stand in front of a car, so sometimes people do just go where they're supposed to go. But the communication went out a few times this year to please, after about 7:30, don't go that way, because we have our school farm in the back. People go back in the back to try to feed their animals. We obviously have to let them do that. But we want them to try to get there early, get it done, and get out before the bulk of the traffic starts to go through there, buses, staff, and everybody else that's coming in there. And we do have students that enter that way if they're walking. They'll enter when the gates are up. Our liaison is there to also check and make sure that there are students when they're coming. So that's kind of how we've managed that this year. It was a little bit more effective, but as I was saying earlier, we are still looking for ways to become more effective. So we're looking at some scanning software, kind of like what GV was talking about. We've sat with 2 folks so far. I think we sat with CPO, we sat with Mia, and we sat with High Five. I think we have a meeting with CPO also, just to see how maybe that could make us a little more efficient, a little more safe, which is what we're talking about here, seeing who's on it, who's not on it. Questions?
Do you know how much 5-Star costs?
Oh,
goodness. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I want to say.
I didn't get a quote for that.
We use that for a lot of other things too. It's not just for this, but I want to say it's not that much. It was under $2,000.
Yeah, it depends on the plan. The activities directors use them to keep points on students and then reward them.
Yeah.
So it depends on the plan. I think their max plan is like $5,000.
It seems like whatever we're doing, we should probably do district-wide so that we get the benefit of.
Right.
Well, I was gonna ask the same question, but ask you guys directly, do you think each school should have their own, and I'm asking everyone, each school should have their own, or do you think we can all work with one that's district-wide?
I think we could work with one that's district-wide. I got the quote for Sika because we have some schools who aren't using anything at all. So that's the only one that I got before this meeting, was the Sika.
I think if you have, I mean, I was just telling Tiffany, we have 18 entrance points. And so, so for us to man it, you would lose the coverage on the inside. So I think that if we address the gate issue, then absolutely wonderful. I used it my last year at Golden Valley. It was an infant then, so we didn't really know what it could do, but it was, you know, it was beneficial. When it came up red, there was no doubt. Like, oh, no, it's red. So, but I think when you have that many points, like we you pull that many people, then we wouldn't be able to watch the students on the campus because you have to man that because you have to do something right away when it's red. Otherwise, it doesn't work like everything else. So.
But your setup would be similar to Golden Valley, where you would probably have 3 entrances in the morning. I mean, I know you have a lot of gates, but that would have to be shut down.
I remember it when
It would be shut down, but if you aren't manning it, a student just has to push on the bar to let a student in.
Yeah.
Literally that's how many, you can count them yourself, but, so we can't man that because there's kids letting kids in and out all day long. That's why, when, you know, this new, they talk about gating the campus, that would be amazing, because
So
that's
we
what we need.
probably
We cannot
need
watch
to
those gates.
eliminate some of those gates, just eliminate them altogether and make them
You also
permanent.
want access points out. If you
Right.
get out, you need enough access points to get off campus.
Yeah.
So just,
I would love.
just FYI, so when I read this, it said that if you go district-wide, it's $6.50. And if it's 12,000 students, that's 78,000. And if it's, if it was just select schools or sites, it's $6.50. And if it's district-wide, it was $4.50, so that's 54,000. So keep an eye on them.
Well, but a lot more than that. I don't know. Mr. Knott, at Merced Heights, there used to be many entrance points as well. I mean, even in recent years.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, I remember being at I think it was a lunch with the principal or something, and students were offering ideas. One was, why are you locking the gates? Some of us don't come until second or third period, and now we have to walk all the way around, you know, I mean, they've got some strong opinions, and I get it, right? But like, you can't enter Merced High from the baseball field anymore?
No. Well, construction's pretty much done now, so yeah, no, you can't get in that way anymore. It was open kind of for a while because of all the stuff that was going on back there. People find ways in there. But now it's closed up again back there, so you can't go in that way. Unless, the only way you can do it, is if you find a gap in the fence, because sometimes the fence is unlocked, so we have to check it frequently. But you can get in around where, I don't know if you know where the custodial shed is back there. Sometimes that's open just because people are working in and out of there, so sometimes you can get back there. But for the most part, no, you can't. The only problem, I guess, if you talk about fencing is kids jump fences. I mean, we jumped fences when we were little, right? So kids jump fences. So that's really the only issue. But I mean, if somebody wants to jump a fence, they're gonna jump it. So that's not something we can control, but yeah.
The staff parking lot.
The staff parking lot is our.
People can come and go.
That's our
That's
issue.
wide open to the campus
Yeah, it is.
all day long,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's the one where sometimes we scratch our heads and try to figure out
Yeah,
what
we have to
can we
fix
do
that, I think.
better about it.
I love the idea. I didn't know you guys called it the dog park. It does feel like you're going through the dog run to get to the office, but the last time I went, the check-in desk was inside that quad area, so actually, you're on campus.
Okay.
If you wanted to be a menace, you are on campus.
Yeah.
It wasn't blocking.
No, it doesn't block it. So the gate to walk in, it's right there next to the gate. It doesn't block the gate, it just, you're gonna walk right past it if you walk into campus. So we have somebody there to, if they need to stop someone, we can. You're right, the table is inside the gate. So, maybe something, I think we put it there just to keep them out of the elements, because that's under.
I figured,
Under the overhang.
yeah. lots of kids are normally in that area,
Mhm.
lunch or break.
Yeah, lunchtime,
what have
yeah,
you.
they're always, well, that's the entry exit, but then there's also kids who just kind of hang around the front by these offices right there.
Thank you guys, thanks for sharing.
Thank you all for coming too.
Mhm.
Any more last minute questions?
Okay, well, I think a comprehensive plan for the district would be a good idea, some ideas.
I agree.
All right, well, that was our last item, so we'll adjourn at 5:45.